Okay, so now I'm going to show you some things to do with the file share. So I have my DFS all set up. I have my IPAM acting as a file server too. So the first thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to go to DC1. If you didn't set up the IPAM as a file server, you can just watch this part. So I'm going to go to Tools, go to Group Policy Management. So I'm going to highlight Group. I'm going to drill down until I get to Group Policy Objects and create a new group policy. I'm going to call this Network Shares. If I wanted to create network shares for all the computers, for all the users in my network, it's easier to do this instead of going to each machine then mapping a share this way to give them a shared drive letter. So what we can do is, I'm going to go back to my DC. I was on the IPM server. So I'm going to right click and edit this policy. I'm going to go down to user configuration, preferences, Windows settings, then go to map, drive maps. Right click, say new map drive. And I want to change this to create. You can't update a share if it's not created. So I'm going to do // IPAM data. And then I want to reconnect every time they log in. And I want to just call it data. I'm going to give it an M drive letter, M for mapped. Be careful with this. If you change this to no change or hide all drives, it's going to hide your C drive as well. If you say for this drive, you hide it. Let's say an application needs to be able to get to the M drive. I'm going to do this first, just so you can see how it works. So I'm just going to create a shared drive, click OK, and then close this. Now that I have the policy created, I'm going to link it to the domain. So every object in the domain will read this policy. If I click on the policy itself, the only people who are going to apply it is authenticated users. So everyone's going to read it, only authenticated users will apply it. So I'm going to do on this machine a GP update force to reread all the policies. Over time, all the machines would get it. Every time a user signs in, because this is a user policy, they would get this because it applies to anyone who signed in. Any authenticated users would get this policy. Authenticated users is a dynamic group, meaning anytime you sign in, you're automatically added to that group. If I go to this PC, I would see the M drive letter. So I'm going to disconnect it just to show you something. So I'm going to go back to my policy, go to edit, drill down to the setting, edit this again, or go to properties. I'm going to hide this drive letter. So it's going to create the drive letter, but it's going to be hidden. Click OK. Now I'm going to do a GP update. If I go to this PC, I'm going to try to refresh. It doesn't show there, but it still shows here. It shouldn't show here at all. Let me close this out and try to reopen it. Oh, there it doesn't show. Okay, so I don't see the M drive letter, but if I type M here, I can still get to it. So you can you can still get to the share, but you'd have to know the drive letter to get to it. This is good for an application that needs to access a shared drive, but you don't want users to access it. So that would be something why you would want to do something like that. I'm going to go back to my policy. I'm going to change it one more time. I'm going to no, I'm going to show this drive letter just to force it to show. Do a GP update. I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to close it out, reopen it. This is acting kind of flaky. I don't know why. It just showed it for a second until I refreshed. Well, there it is. It's showing up over here. But then it disappeared again. I'm going to try it on this machine. So when I sign in, it's going to read that policy. So it shows it. But notice, because when I set up the policy, I'm going to go back to DC1. I'm showing it as data. By putting this label here, it's not going to show me the actual server name or any information about where that share is located. Because at that point, you can kind of keep it a little bit of information hidden from the user so they don't start exploring that server. So that's a nice little security feature. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is how to do a roaming profile. So on our DFS server, I have a folder for called profiles. And if I look up my file and storage services, I can see that permissions are anyone that's a domain user can write to this folder. I set it on here, and it should be at this point replicated to over here. Yeah, and it got replicated over to the second machine. So if you set it on one, if you set the permissions on one share, it'll get replicated over to the second copy of that share. So I'm going to go in for on my DC1, and I'm going to open up users and computers. I have one user called user1. I'm going to go into that user, and under the profile tab, I'm going to type // contoso.com. That's my DFS. My namespace is public, and under that I have a folder called profiles. Then I want to put user1 there. So when user1 signs in, they will automatically save their profile to that share. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to do this on the IPAM just as a test. I'm going to sign out as the administrator account. And I'm going to sign in as, nope, I got to sign out again. Sorry. You get that error that you can't connect to a network drive, it'll reconnect. I'm going to go to other user and sign in as U1. I don't know why that keeps giving me that error. I shouldn't give it. See, once you click on it, it connects. No problem. Um, so user profiles are stored here. If I go under C users, I have this U1 profile. When I go to it, it shows me all my files that I have accessed. Right now, I'm using something called a cached copy. So when I log in, it downloads my roaming profile from the DFS servers, one of the machines, whoever's sharing that data. I could be downloading from S1 or could be downloading it from S2, and it caches it locally. And I use this local copy. I'm going to show all my hidden files. And this is a copy of something called ntuser.dat. If I change it to ntuser.man, they wouldn't be able to make changes to their profile. But right now, I'm just leaving it alone. So as long as I'm signed in, I have this file open. So I'm using a roaming profile right now. I'm going to log out and sign back in if I can find my mouse as the administrator account. Again, I don't know why that's happening. So I'm going to right click and go to System. Right click the Start menu, go to System. I don't know where they hid this stuff since. Okay, this is what I was looking for. So when I went to System, now I have to scroll here to go back to the original menu. So I have this Advanced Settings right here, Advanced System Settings. Then under that, I have User Profiles. And I can see that U1 has a roaming profile. If it says roaming temp, that means you had a problem with your share. They couldn't write to it. So this is a roaming profile right now for U1. And if I go to the DFS share, contoso.com public, and I click profiles, I can see U1 has a folder. I can't access it. Only U1 can. Only U1 has permissions to that folder. you as a network admin should never have access to someone's personal documents. Even if it's company policy that they're not allowed to save personal pictures on their computers, you're not allowed to check. The Constitution grants people right to privacy. So if you give them a profile, allow them to sign in the machine, you shouldn't be allowed to access their personal documents. They could have something in there that's private that you shouldn't see. So by default, the admins don't have access to profiles. Guys, this V6 could be a V2, could be a V4. That just means which version of Windows. So this is the sixth version of a roaming profile. If someone has a Windows um, 2000 profile, it's not really compatible with, no, a Windows 2008 profile. It's not really compatible with this type of profile. So you might have a U1 V U1 and a U1 V6 to indicate they have two profiles. One where they've signed in a 2008 box and one where they've signed in something later than that. So just be aware that a user might have multiple profiles if like they sign into any old machines. So they need to be careful because if they do sign into multiple machines with a roaming profile, like an old Vista box versus a Windows 10 box, at that point the documents might not be there. So you need to be very careful. So now we have a roaming profile. So what happens every time the user logs in, they would download the profile from the network share, cache it locally in the users folder, and they would use it here. And when they would log off, they would upload it back to the server. So you don't attach to the server at all times, only when you log in and log off, which could cause a problem. Let's just say someone has a whole bunch of videos and stuff in their roaming profile. So when they log in the morning, when everyone else logs in at 9 o'clock, you could have something called a login storm where everyone's trying to download the roaming profile, um, and it could make login really long. So we can alleviate that by doing some things to the roaming profile. Roaming profile, it's kind of a pain to administer because users do some weird things to roaming profiles. But by setting up a roaming profile, I only need to back up my DFS servers. I don't need to back up every workstation where their users save stuff. Because if they save stuff, if they go to my documents and they save something, it's going to be part of that roaming profile and it'll be up on the server. So you really only have to back up the server. Data shouldn't be local anymore. So I'm going to sign back in as U1. I only have to put Contoso if it's the admin account. That's annoying. Okay, so I'm going to go to my profile. And when I right click documents and go to properties, and I click on the location tab, I can see I'm using the local copy, not the one on the file server, because I download it when I log in. It stores under the user folder and I use the local copy. It's when I sign out that it uploads the changes. So I'm going to log out of here and I'm going to do something else. So I'm going to go back to my DC. I'm going to go to Tools, Group Policy Management. So I'm going to do something called folder redirection. So I'm going to right click, create a new group policy. I'm going to call it folder redirection. Click edit, go to policies, Windows settings. I think I'm in the wrong area, and I am. Go to users, policies, Windows settings, and then click on folder redirection. So if I look and do app data, it takes me %, app data, %. It takes me to this folder. That's a variable. %, app data, %, is the app data for my user account. So when I install Microsoft Office and I customize a ribbon, when I sign into another machine, I want that ribbon to be customized just like I did on this machine. So all that data is stored in the app data folder where you customize any application. So I want to make sure that that gets copied wherever I go. But that folder can be very big. So can the documents folder, so can their pictures folder. Um, all these, the videos folder can all be very big. So what happens with roaming profiles, or I can even do this without a roaming profile for backup purposes. I can remove all these folders from their profile, whether it's roaming or local. And what I can do in replace of that folder, I could put a network location. So basically, I want to store all of their documents on the file server, on the DFS. And when they click on documents, it takes them to a network share, like a shared drive letter. So I'm going to show you how it works. So I'm going to go into app data. I'm going to do basic configuration. I want to show you first some other things. So when I create this, only the users will have access to that folder. No admins. That should be by default. And when they log in the first time after creating this policy, I want to take whatever machine they're at, I want to move all the stuff to the new file share. And when they leave the policy, what do I want to do? I'm going to leave the data on the file share. And at that point, someone's going to have to come and copy it locally to where they're at, to where they want to be normally. So when you add them to the policy, it's going to move the data to the file share. When they are no longer being controlled by this policy, it'll leave the data on the file share. Then some network admin is going to have to come, or some tech is going to have to come and copy the data to their local machine. So as a fail-safe, I'm going to leave it on the server because maybe they signed in to a workstation they normally don't use. So I don't want them to copy it to that workstation. I'm just going to leave it on the server so I can make sure that they sign into the right machine before I move it back. And so basically, what I'm going to do is move this folder to a network file share, to our redirect folder that we created on the DFS server. So you can't see it, but I just need to put that path. It'll create a subfolder under that for that user account that only they have permissions to. So I'm going to do it for that. And it's saying if you have an old 2000 box, it's not going to work right. We understand that. I'm going to do it for their documents folder. Right click, go to properties, basic, and just paste it in the path. Oh, I didn't copy it. I forgot I'm on ACE. Okay, I'm going to copy, and you can see that it's giving you an example. Giving me a warning. I'm going to do it for the video folder. I could just say use the same path as the documents folder, but I'm just going to do basic, paste it in. Okay, and you can do that for whatever folders you want. You know, people think their desktop is a place to store files. Again, I'm going to post that in there. Okay, so I have this policy set up. By default, authenticated users will read it, so everyone will get this. I'm going to pin it to the domain. So now I'm going to test it. I'm going to sign in to IPAM as U1. As soon as I sign in, I'm going to reread the policies. Right there, it's applying the policy. So the first time you sign in with the folder redirection policy, it is it's going to copy everything where it needs to be. So normally in my profile, whether it's roaming or local, I had a documents folder, and in that documents folder was all my documents, and I had a video folder with all my videos. So now I don't know why that's still giving that error. Okay, so right now I'm signed in. So if I right click my documents folder and go to properties, and I click on location, I can see that it takes me to a network path. So I pulled the documents folder out of the roaming profile or the local profile, and I replaced it with a link to where the data actually is on my DFS shares. So um, right now it's saying that it's copying. I've never seen this tab before, guys. This is new in 2019. So it's basically letting you know where you're connecting to. If this was a regular network share like I did on the IPAM, you wouldn't have this. So this is kind of nice. It's telling you which server you're actually connecting to. So users don't know any difference. So this is basically a network share. When they click on this, they're accessing a network share. So when I say new file, I'm not saving this locally. It's going to be on the network share. I can manually go to that path, contoso.com, public. If I go to the redirect folder, go to U1, I can see in my documents folder, right there's that document I created. So these aren't local folders anymore. That right there is my a network share. This is a network share. This is a network share. So if I right click it, go to properties, go to location, I can see it's a network share. My downloads, which I didn't configure, is still a local path. So this is part of my profile. So anything that was in this folder, when I signed in, I copied it from the share, put it locally, and I'm going to use it locally. But for documents, videos, my app data, it's all being, it's just a network share. So we pulled it out of the profile and replaced it with the link. And all the data is actually stored on one of these two machines or both of these two machines. Let me think of what else. Okay, one more thing. Going back to roaming profiles. Let's just say I needed to configure the roaming profile for a bunch of users. So I'm going to create two more users. User 2, U2, set the password. User 3, U3, set the password. Okay. If you work for some company, they do a lot of hires, and you might be adding multiple user accounts at one time, from a list or something. So I could highlight both those users, right click, and go to properties. This is called multiple select. So I'm going to go to the profile tab. Now I can do // contoso.com public profiles and then %, username, %. I'm going to replace their username with a variable. So when I click OK, and I highlight any one user account, okay, it's right here. I can see it replace that variable %, username, % with user3 for that user. And for this user, it replaced it with U2. So if you're dealing with multiple user accounts and you need to edit all their profiles at one time, you have that feature called multi-select, where if you select multiple users, guys, what I'm doing is clicking on one, holding down Shift, then clicking on the last one. Or if they're not in series, I can click on one, hold down Control if they're not all in a row. And so you can make changes to multiple user accounts at one time, but then you have to use a variable. I'm going to right click the start menu, go back to system. This is the new system menu. I want to go to the old one, so I'm going to go to system info. And under advanced systems, down here is my environmental variables. And if I go all the way down, I have one called username. And you refer to this as %, username, %. So these are all the variable names that are set for every user. This is system wide. This is just for this user account. Okay, so guys, this is the last video for this class. I kind of put a lot of little things that really probably shouldn't be part of this class, but I think they're important to know because you will be doing stuff like that for the job. Um, so this is kind of a mix of a whole bunch of little topics. Okay, that's the last video for the class. When you're done with this, please send me an email, and I will go through and check to make sure that all your labs are done, and then give you credit if you have all the labs. I'm not going to be grading each individual lab to make sure everything is perfect. I'm just going to make sure that you've went through all the labs. That's my goal. Um, so I hope you enjoyed this class. You know how to reach me if you need my help. Thank you very much.